Oh, I didn't see you there. Anyways. Hello, and welcome to my video. Today we are talking about Java and how we execute it using Eclipse IDE. Wait, hold on. The professor has given us a set of instructions. Hold up. Oh, she wants us to make a program dedicated on calculating on how many dozen does a certain input have, and also what are the excess value that is not count as a dozen. What? And another set of problem where the first input is the multiple for the second input, and when it is not applicable for the second input, it should display as not the multiple of it. This can be that hard, innit? Oh my god, why? What is this? Why is it red? What? Whoa! I'm done. I'm actually done. Search it on Google. Why is it that? I said I'm done. And it's not equal to that or less than that. And I run this. It works! Finally! It freaking works! Well, that was quite unpleasant. But who cares? Hello and welcome to my video where I will explain on how I come up with this set of codes to form what was being instructed for us to do. So without further ado, let us get started, shall we? The first instruction for us is to make a program dedicated on making an input and with the use of coding to compute on how many dozen does the input has and how less than a dozen or how many is still missing for it to be considered a dozen, with a sample output given. So here we're at Eclipse, and here is the full code for the first set of instruction. So now our class is called dozen. Before we actually continue to evaluate the program, we first import java.util.scanner for us to declare scanner input is equivalent to new scanner system.in, where we can actually use the scanner for putting in values or inputs. And with the use of declaring eggs as an integer, we can now say that eggs can be an input where the scanner will actually scan it and declare it that we need to input a value, specifically integer value. Next is to print also the number of dozen and the eggs less than a dozen. And now we actually have to declare a public static integer with a method name of determine dozen with the inside of the variable which is integer eggs. Next is to declare dozen is equivalent to eggs as integer and final dozen as an integer as well. Now we use a loop statement here, which is the for loop statement. So for the loop for, we use final dozen is equivalent to 0, and the next declaration is if dozen is greater than or equivalent to 12, and if it's true, we're going to subtract 12 to dozen and store that answer to dozen, and we go back and incremented final dozen from 0 to 1. So once we actually have done that, and if the value of dozen is not equivalent or not greater than or equal to 12, it will return final dozen to determine dozen, and that will be the output for the plus determined dozen, opening and close parenthesis, eggs, where eggs is the scanner input, the value that we actually inputted on said program. And then after that, we have another public static integer method, another method domain, where the method name is show less dozen with the declaration of eggs as integer again. Then we declare dozen is equals to eggs as integer again. Then we use the for loop statement again. Then we declare another final dozen as an integer with the value of 0. Then after that, we use if dozen is greater than or equals to 12 again, we subtract 12 to dozen and store it again. Then go back to final dozen, the increment of final dozen. Next, if the dozen is not greater than or equals to 12, we will return dozen, and on how many does the dozen have in store, or how many does the dozen store from the previous for loop statement, and that will be show at the show less dozen method name. So when we actually run the program, just like here, and we enter the number of eggs is 12, you can say that the number of dozen is 1, and the eggs less than a dozen is 0, because a dozen is consist of 12. A dozen of eggs is consisting of 12 eggs. So if we try the given sample output, which is 15, it will output a certain value, which is number of dozen, which is 1, and the eggs less than a dozen is 3. Because if you think about it, 12 eggs is a dozen, and the only thing that is remaining is 3 numbers or 3 eggs. So that will be the output for the eggs less than a dozen. And for the second output, if it has more than 12, it subtracted more than ones by 12, it will output like this. It will say that the number of dozen is 2, and this is another sample output that was given to us. And now if we try another set of numbers like 24, which is 2 dozen, it will output a number of dozen of 2 and less than a dozen, which is 0. So that is for the first instruction or set of problem that has given to us by our lovely professor. The second instruction is to determine whether the first integer input is the multiple for the second integer input, also with a sample output given. Now let us continue on our second set of instructions, where I personally programmed this code and with the use of if statements and other method strategies. We call this class as multiple method, and we import java.util.scanner for us to be able to input values at the console at the end of the programming. Now we declare scanner input equals to new scanner system.in for us to be able to insert inputs, and we declare first int, second int, and ans or answer as integer. Now we print out enter first integer, then we declare first int as an input, and then we print out enter second integer, then we use second int as an input. Next on the line is we declare or we process ans or answer is equivalent to second int modulo of or modulus of first int. Then we use a method named last is multiple with open and close parentheses answer, first int and second int. Then we declare public static void last is multiple with the declaration of answer, first int and second int as an integer. Then we use if and else statement, where on the declaration of if, answer should not be equal to 1. If the statement is true, it will print out the second int, our second integer value is multiple of our first integer value. Then if the statement is false, it will print out that second integer, our input for our second integer is not the multiple of our first input integer. And that's how you program or make a set of codes for the said instructions. Now let us run this class and enter our first integer, which is 2, and our second integer as 14. And as a part of the sample output given, it is exactly like this, where 14 is multiple of 2, which is correct in mathematical way. Then we run it again, then we put 2 and 15, we get the output of 15 is not multiple of 2, because in mathematically speaking, it is not the multiple of 2. The multiple of 2 is a set of numbers that are multiplied by 2, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. 15 is in the middle of 14, 16, which can be determined as the multiple for 2. But if we actually run it again and use 3 on 15, 15 is multiple of 3. And if we use 3 on the first integer and 14 on the second, 14 is multiple of 3. Why is that?
What is that?
Then we use an if and else statement for us to declare if the second integer or the second input is the multiple for the first input or the first integer that we input. So for us to visualize it, let us run the program and let us put 2 and enter second integer, which is 14. 14 is a multiple of 2 and mathematically correct. And if 2 is the first integer and if it is 15, 15 is a multiple of 2, mathematically speaking. Then if we use the number or value 3 on the first integer, then we use 15, 15 is a multiple of 3. Then we run it again, we use 3 again as the first integer, then we put 14 as the second integer, 14 is a multiple of 3. That's how this program was coded. So the first integer is being the one that will be divided by the second integer or the second input for the second integer. I hope you have understood anything from my video, and I really do hope it helps a lot, especially to the ones who actually in need of it. And I'm not doing this as only for the passing of grade, but also to help the ones who need and who are experiencing difficultness on using Java in Eclipse. And again, thank you for actually watching my video, and I hope you have a good day. See you next time.